Sean Sewell here with Engearment.com podcast. Really excited to have on for the third time my friend and New York Times bestselling author, Brad Kearns. Brad Kearns is a very accomplished author, has his own podcast, the B-Rad Podcast. He is a champion athlete, and most recently, him and his friend Mark Sisson wrote a book called Born to Walk. I have a copy right here. So we have a lot to talk about from health and fitness standpoints, as well as training, and what does it mean to be born to walk as opposed to born to run or other modalities. So big, huge intro there. Sorry, Brad, but welcome back to the show.
Gosh, every time I hear your voice, I feel so relaxed and calm now. So we're going to have a nice, mellow, breezy show, but we do have some really important topics to discuss. And the reason that Mark Sisson and I worked on this book is we're still kind of sitting back, frustrated and exasperated at the mainstream approach to fitness. And by and large, it appears to be programming and cultural messaging and ethos that are overly stressful and exhausting and fatiguing. And so we have these well-meaning segment of society that really does want to get out and move and take care of their bodies, and they're being socialized to push their bodies into fatigue, burnout, exhaustion, illness, and injury, rather than adopt a sensible approach. And we spent some time talking in the book about the world's great endurance athletes like Eliud Kipchoge, the greatest marathoner of all time. And it's so interesting to realize that the elite athletes, the top people that we just saw racing in the Olympics in Paris, they train in a more sensible, relatively less stressful manner than the average recreational enthusiast who's jogging down the road trying to drop an extra 10 pounds. And so we need to understand how the body works, what's the basis of aerobic conditioning to build endurance in the body without falling apart, because it's by and large what we're seeing: a lot of attrition. The injury rate among regular runners is so stunning and embarrassing. I don't even want to say it on your podcast, but I'm going to. There's different research from around the world. Yale University School of Medicine reveals that 50% of all regular runners are injured every year, and 25% of regular runners are injured at any given time. So we're basically going out there. No one's tackling people on the roads and trails. And so it's clear that we have a huge problem in the general mainstream approach to endurance training.
That opened up a whole lot of questions. Wow. Okay, so a lot of people are pushing too hard, and I'm not too sure it's because they feel like more pain, more gain, or they have to be in pain to achieve, or calories in, calories out, or I'm not too
Mm,
sure the methodology of their thinking is.
hmm
But it sounds like you guys have done a lot of research and can easily debunk a lot of this, and hopefully save a lot of people's health and well-being in the process.
Yeah, your two speculations are spot on. One of them is this socialization that we need to feel discomfort in order to, quote, get a workout, end quote. And then there's also in the back of everyone's mind, there's this idea that's been forced down our throats that if you run at this pace for this many miles, you're going to burn X amount of calories. And if you times that by 30, you're going to lose 5 pounds in a month and you're going to look great. And it just doesn't play out in all the research. And I think finally we're turning the tide on that, where calories in, calories out is getting appropriately trashed, because there's so many other variables.
Yep.
And one of them is called the compensation theory of exercise. This is a branch of uh, medical science, exercise physiology, whereby it's observed that your body engages in assortment of compensation behaviors to counteract a stressful sort of workout regimen. So generally speaking, you're going to get up at 6 a.m., set that alarm, go hit the spin class, burn a bunch of calories, sweat, and then the rest of the day, you're going to be lazier and have a tendency to eat more, both on a conscious and a subconscious level. So conscious level is, honey, can you rake the leaves today? I'll do it tomorrow. I'm tired. I got up at 6 a.m. and slammed it in the gym. And then subconsciously, you move a little slower. You're less likely to pop up and rush down a staircase to grab a pad of post-it notes and come back up. You're just conserving energy because the workout pattern is overly stressful. And then your appetite and satiety hormones get dysregulated from exhaustive exercise as well. So the 6 a.m. spinning class often pairs directly with reaching for a pint of Ben and Jerry's in the evening.
Yeah, that's good. Uh, it's a lot to unpack there as well. So like the ghrelin and leptin get out of balance here, the satiation and hunger hormones, right? From overdoing it. And again, do you think it's partly because people don't know what they don't know and like they just default to this? Like, how do we get it through their heads? Like, you can do it with more intuition and more, or less can be more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Sean. That's why we're putting our heart and soul into these podcasts and trying to convey an alternate information. And what's amazing now with our ready access to information is, for example, I mentioned Kipchoge. He published his training log on the internet. The nitty-gritty details, which a lot of athletes will keep secret, or the mysterious way that he broke 2 hours for the marathon. So it's all there. The exercise physiologists, the coaches, the athletes have had a field day analyzing it and breaking it down. And one amazing revelation comes through is that 83% of his weekly mileage is performed at what we in the West call zone one exercise, not zone two, zone one.
Whoa,
Something like 9% is zone two, and then the latter 8% would be a zone three, zone four.
whoa.
Okay, so we are now getting bombarded with all this messaging about how zone two is the ultimate fitness pillar, that you have to get your zone two every week, and that's great, and I support that because the upper limit of zone two is what's called fat max heart rate. I'll talk about that in a moment, how important that is. But I think we've disregarded the tremendous importance and the amazing benefits of exercising in zone one, which is very comfortable, right? As you stage up through zone five being a sprint all out, zone three and four are like anaerobic threshold type sessions and so forth, and zone two is that aerobic range. But zone one, for almost everyone listening, unless we have some Olympians out there listening, that would be a medium or brisk walk if you're super fit. So for most, in the example of running, this also applies to all endurance and aerobic sports, that most runners should spend the vast majority of their time walking in order to model the training pattern of the greatest marathoner who's ever lived. But instead, maybe influenced by training partners, or you get pushed along when you go and meet with the crowd on Saturday morning because you don't want to fall behind, you start drifting above this very important distinction point called fat max heart rate, where the physiological effects of the workout have a significant difference. And so fat max heart rate is the point that you're burning the maximum number of fat calories per minute. If you were to speed up, of course, you're going to burn more calories, right? The faster you go, the more calories per minute you burn. When you're sprinting, you burn way more calories than when you're jogging or walking. But at fat max, if you envision like an upside down U-shaped graph, you hit fat max, and then as you speed up and go faster, your fat burning rate drops in favor of a significant spike in glucose metabolism and also ventilation and respiration rate. And so you can go into a laboratory and identify this zone two, this fat max heart rate, or Dr. Maffetone's widely respected formula is 180 minus your age in beats per minute is pretty close to your fat max heart rate. So look, I'm almost 60. Now my fat max heart rate is 120 beats per minute. A 30-year-old would 180 minus 30, 150 would be their fat max. And it's a really good estimate of that point where you should perform the vast majority of your endurance exercise at or below or well below fat max heart rate. And what happens is when people strap on the heart rate monitor for the first time, you realize how incredibly comfortable it is when you get up to that fat max level. It doesn't even feel like you're getting much of a workout because emphasizing fat burning is very comfortable. You have sufficient oxygen, for example, to carry on a conversation without getting out of breath for the entire hour that you're out there on your jog or your brisk walk, ideally. And so learning how to train and build an aerobic base properly is all about slowing down for the vast majority of people and training the body appropriately so that you can teach your body to become efficient at burning fat 24 hours a day, rather than when you keep bumping up over zone two and you do a 30 or a 45 or a 60-minute workout, what happens is you become good at sugar burning, and then you become good at sugar chomping, like the example I used where you're slamming at 6 in the morning, and then because you've depleted your glycogen and exhausted your overall physical mechanisms doing these medium to difficult workouts, you tend to want to replenish with quick energy carbohydrates.
This is incredible. I was just thinking about the people we work with a lot of backcountry skiers and snowboarders and splitboarders, like you see in the background there. They're always asking me as a fitness professional, what is the tempo I should go at? And I try and recommend to them, you should be able to talk. You should be able to talk with your,
Exactly.
yeah. And if you can do that, you can sustain that. And a lot of them at first are like, well, don't you want to get up there faster? I'm like, you're going to burn out before you get to your goal. So just one of my favorite sayings from a friend of both of ours, Eric Frohart, retired Navy SEAL, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Yeah. So if you can
That's
be
great.
smooth and talk, you can get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and we want to look at training and aerobic conditioning with a big picture perspective. And so if you look at a year's time or 6 months' time rather than it's 6 weeks for the marathon and I signed up for this club and we're going to train and we're going to get ready for it, that's where you get this massive rate of attrition and overuse injury. Because when exercise is too stressful, as we know, there's entire books and research about this, your hormones get out of balance, your immune system becomes suppressed, and if you do this as a pattern, like many people that have been in our community for years and decades, you can actually increase cardiovascular disease risk factors from your devotion to extreme endurance training. There's a whole chapter in the book, The Catastrophe of Chronic Cardio, where we have all this fallout and negative repercussions of people who seem to be the fittest person in the neighborhood, but inside they're constantly scarring and inflaming the heart from these gnarly workouts that last for hours in the case of like the extreme mountain biker and road biker people or the long distance ultra marathon runners. And after a while, it turns into, beating up your cardiovascular system in the same manner that you wear out your knees or your hips when you do too much jujitsu or running on pavement or what have you.
That's a really fascinating point. Too much cardio being counterproductive. It, very interestingly, as I was reading the book here, one of my clients went to a retreat, and part of the retreat was for people who have physical addictions to exercise. And one of
Mm.
them was the founders of a big city marathon. I won't say which one, but it's really fascinating how people can get addicted to exercise. It might seem counterintuitive, but there's a lot of release of different hormones, like you mentioned, and can become addictive. And there's also maybe psychologically people get addicted to it because they feel obligated to it.
That's right. And it's a little appreciated issue. It's kind of the secret elephant in the room of the endurance scene. And part of it is because endurance training is often used as a successful therapy to help people overcome truly destructive addictions to substances and so forth. So it's an effective crutch or an effective transition away from a substance to go and get that endorphin high and that dopamine spike from exercise. So certainly we have a triage issue here where we want to deal with the most severe addictions first and oftentimes redirect yourself to something that's certainly addictive, but not as immediately destructive and life-threatening. But the addicted exercise person doesn't get as much sympathy or resources or support as someone who's down and out in other ways. However, it is a major issue, and I think we can determine really easily whether we're drifting in that unfortunate direction by asking there's a series of 9 questions you can ask to determine if you're an addict. I had a food expert on my podcast, Dr. Joe Niflin from Stanford, and you can determine if you're addicted to food with this 9 question thing. And she said, "Oh, by the way, just about everyone is starting with 4 yeses because yes, I need to have food every day. Yes, if I don't get it, I think about it." And so there's a lot of food addiction in society. There's also minimally appreciated. But if you feel lousy and moody and cranky, if you don't get your workout, that is a sign that you're addicted, because the definition of an addict is that they need to get to uh, they need to get a hit just to feel normal. It's not really for the high that we think about or mischaracterize it, where an addict needs to go on the street and spend money to get high. What they need to do is to get to baseline when they're in the throes of addiction. And so that's like the first and most easy one, is that if your day's not right and your mood is not right, unless you go and in many cases push yourself a little bit too hard, that's a big problem to look at. And what we're trying to convince people, especially if you have, aspirations of being fit and achieving goals, the way to get to the best that your body has is to take care of yourself and tone things down and honor athletes like Kipchoge, who are running and performing well within their capacity almost all the time. You posed a question earlier, and we talked about culture, and we talked about the influences that push people. I'm also going to say like Hollywood, right? Because Rocky Balboa showed us all that if you push yourself hard enough, you'll make it through the 15 rounds with Apollo Creed. And so we've been socialized with these flawed notions that no pain, no gain is the way to fitness.
Yeah, you're so right. And a lot of people can probably relate to this as well. There's a current influx of influential people who are very much badass, but like a David Goggins or such, like,
Whew.
yeah,
He
who's
he has a few
about?
paragraphs in the book, Sean,
Pretty
and
good.
oh boy, I got a lot of. It's a very nuanced topic,
Hmm.
uh, but it's kind of strange that someone is celebrated for basically doing torturous stuff to the body. However, it kind of goes back to that addiction thing. Like if you are overcoming uh, childhood traumas and PTSD and low self-esteem and all these things, and crossing a finish line, it can represent a tremendous achievement and a life-changing turnaround or a recalibration of patterns and thought patterns and beliefs that don't serve you. However, there's a sensibility here where, again, what we're watching on TV in the Olympics is athletes who take exquisite care of their body to reach their highest level of peak performance. They're not abusing their body, whereby many recreational people are using exercise as kind of an outlet for obsessive compulsive behavior tendencies and other sorts of unhealthy approaches to exercise.
I'm glad we're on the same page with that. Half my business is meeting people who are influenced by the David Goggins and Liver King and stuff, and they come
Yeah.
in the line to do these things, and I'm like, we're going to do a lot less of that, but we're going to sustain you for a lot longer for quality of life.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
think it's like, get your ass off the couch is a wonderful mantra for a huge percentage of the modern population. And by any means necessary, you can go pick up a book about the Navy SEAL that tortured his body and kept going even when he collapsed and all that stuff. And it's like if that's going to give you a little sprinkling of energy and motivation to get off the couch, that's great. But then for all the people out there that already have these health and fitness ambitions and are trying to figure out the puzzle, we got to dispense of the nonsense and the extremism because it really is super harmful.
yeah, it really is. I'm glad you're putting this work together with Mark and sharing these studies and sharing what some professional athletes are doing. And like that blew my mind at the level one, because level one gets all the
It's
credit.
it's mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing.
It
But the
is.
funny thing is, like, if you saw him running down the path in your town, if he's in town for the Denver Marathon tomorrow, or he's running down the Charles River in Boston the day before the marathon, an easy day for Kipchoge is 18 miles at 8-minute pace in the mountains. So you get the flawed assumption that you got to go out there and grind to be an accomplished runner. But we have to look at that relative intensity whereby his zone one pace is 8 minutes per mile. That's actually his pace for the marathon is 4 minutes 34 per mile, right? So it's like 60 something percent slower than his marathon pace. So let's take the average marathon finisher. We have all these stats in the book. Worldwide, the average marathon finisher these days is a 4 hour 31, which is 10 minutes and 18 seconds per mile. A very, very impressive accomplishment to run 26 miles at 10:18 pace. But the proper way to train for it, as evidenced by the world record, is to perform a lot of your training at 40 to 60% slower than that pace. And then, as you make that calculation, what does that bring us to? Well, exercise physiology research reveals that the human gait pattern switches from walking to jogging at around 14 minutes a mile. And so if you're not going faster than 14 minutes a mile, you should be walking. You can jog slower than that if you want and pound your joints and your connective tissue and go 14 minutes, 10 seconds. And then your friend's walking next to you, filming you for your next Instagram post, whatever. So walking without that impact trauma is a great workout. And for most people, it's a simple calculation. You check your fat max heart rate. So it's 180 minus your age in beats per minute. And remember, we want to stay below fat max for the entire session. So if you're going and testing your fat max heart rate for 4 minutes, hey, that's great. You can jog. But if you're going for 5 miles or 10 miles or whatever, your pace needs to ensure that you're staying below that for the whole workout. Otherwise, the whole physiological effect of the workout changes and you're back into sugar burning category. So what that means for most people is perhaps starting out at a slow jog, walking for 30 seconds every mile, and then towards the end of the workout, 45 to 60 minutes in, your slow jog has now become a brisk walk. And it might feel frustrating with your competitive mentality, like, dang, I want to keep my same pace that my smartwatch is telling me. But that's the proper way to train, where you're going to have to slow down as you extend the workout in order to train the physiology correctly.
Oh, I love it. This goes back to reminds me a lot of when I was working with Pavel and Dr. Craig Marker, and we were using similar formula, the Maftone method, minus a certain amount to get to a threshold you want to hit for 10 seconds to deplete the creatine phosphate
Mm.
system, and then allow for a lot of recovery so you don't go into the glycolytic state. So this makes a lot of sense. And so I was doing the Maftone method. And I got my 134. So for my, I want to keep that in mind, 134 or lower.
Yeah,
Oh, this is so fun talking about all this stuff. I'm a nerd for it, as is our audience too.
right
Um,
on.
there's a couple more things I wanted to talk about. So running in general. So last year we had on the author of Born to Run, had a great discussion with him, and he, talked about going down to Copper Canyon in Mexico and running with these ultra running natives, and it got a lot of sensational attention. I'm not a runner myself, so I'm not attracted to the idea of running. But so Born to Walk, I love how it's way more approachable for more people and a healthier overall experience. But what is the big deal with running? Like, where did this notion that people should go running for health come from?
Yeah, I mean, Born to Run was a 2009 book, Christopher McDougall. It was a wonderful story of these amazing primitive living Tarahumara in Mexico and how the Western ultra running stars went down there and contested their race. And there was a lot of background about the amazing endurance capabilities of the human. And part of the reason that we rose to the top of the food chain is that we can outlast other creatures in a pure endurance model. So there's a cute video on YouTube where they line up a bunch of different animals for a hypothetical race. And so the cheetah kicks everybody's butt at 200 meters, but when you get to a mile, it's the antelope. And then when you get to, uh, you know, uh, longer and longer, the horse and the human are prevailing. And actually, humans can outlast even an endurance horse for these 100-mile races. There's one, the Western states in California, where the horses and the humans compete on the same course, and these humans are amazing, even in hot temperatures, especially because we have all these attributes from evolution. We're bipedal, we have narrow hips, we have sweat mechanisms, and we have all these capabilities that make us great endurance athletes. And so we can misinterpret evolutionary biology to conclude that humans are born to run long distances on the regular. But the truth is, we are capable of performing magnificent endurance feats once in a while in the model of survival of the fittest and life or death selection pressure. So you can go on YouTube right now and watch this documentary called The Great Dance, and it's the first known filmed account of a persistence hunt by the primitive living humans, the Aikang Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert in Africa. And so we have lived as hunter-gatherers for 2 million years, right? That's how we evolved. And these guys are still doing it in the old school style. So it's a pretty fascinating documentary to see this is how humans evolved and lived and got their food. And what these Bushmen did was they wore down a kudu antelope over a 4 hour tracking session in temperatures exceeding 100 degrees. And the antelope was finally exhausted, and they walked up to it and put a ceremonial spear through the heart and then took it back and enjoyed the food. But the takeaway from that is that, yeah, these guys can wear down an antelope with 4 hours in the heat, but they did not get up the next day and run an easy 6 miles, nor hit the long 20-miler on Saturday in preparation for this ridiculously crazy event known as the marathon, where you're pounding for 26.2 miles on cement in the name of health and fitness. And so we've kind of bastardized this human genetic gift for endurance into the modern day running boom. And the book goes through this in the first chapter with some interesting anecdotes. One of my favorite is like, the marathon's 26.2 miles. Most of your listeners probably know that. And it emanates from this legend of this great Greek endurance runner he was a foot messenger in the army. They're called hemerodromus or hemerodromi, dromoi plural. And so this guy Phidippides was the most amazing Greek foot messenger that relayed important messages and helped the Greeks prevail and shape Western civilization as we know it today. So the legend goes that Phidippides ran 26 miles from the city of Marathon in Greece to Athens to report victory to the assembled leaders in Athens. It's Nike Nike Neni Kayan. That means rejoice we conquer. And so as the legend goes, he ran the 26 miles. He said rejoice we conquer, and he collapsed and died. And so the glory of what Phidippides did is the inspiration for the modern day marathon, which started in the 1896, the recreation of the modern Olympic Games. They said, hey, let's throw a marathon in there in honor of Phidippides. Here's the problem. It never actually happened. The story was fabricated in an 1879 poem by Robert Browning, who took liberties with Greek history in order to make a fanciful poem. So what really happened, Phidippides was a real person. He was a legendary hemerodromus, but he actually ran from Athens to Sparta 153 miles in 36 hours over rough terrain where he could beat a horse. He had to do it because he needed to request the Spartans' help in battle for this major battle against the Persians that shaped Western civilization. He went to Sparta and he found out they were on religious holiday. So he immediately had to turn around and run back to Athens to tell the Athenians to wait before going to battle, to wait for the Spartans' help. So he ran 306 miles in 4 days, which Dean Karnassus, the modern day ultra runner who retraced the steps of Phidippides and did this run, he says it's one of the greatest human athletic achievements in the history of the world. Now, I'm telling this funny story because the takeaway is that if we really want to honor Phidippides, today's marathon should be a 153 freaking mile race or 306-mile race. But 26 is an arbitrary distance that is by far out of the realm of health and wellness for the average modern human who sits at a desk and sits in a car and sits on a couch and relaxes and then thinks that they're going to go run like this guy Phidippides. And it's so ridiculous because if we just tomorrow if Brad and Sean decided and proposed to society that we change the marathon from 26 miles to 13 miles, we'd all be vastly better off. We'd go home earlier. We could go to brunch earlier. Our fans on the sidewalk that were waiting for us in the freezing cold temperatures or the windy day in New York City, it would all end earlier, and it would be more aligned with an overall pursuit of health and wellness, because 13 miles is an extremely long way for a human to run, and you have to practice and get ready and prepare. 6 miles is an extremely long way for a human to run. But now, if we think that this marathon is kind of in the ridiculous category rather than the ultimate running accomplishment, now we can expand our perspective about what it means to be fit. And as you have with all the wonderful guests on your podcast, you mentioned Craig Marker, we need to build and maintain our strength throughout life as probably the number one priority for longevity. The aerobic conditioning certainly is an important aspect, but you do that by exercising frequently in all manner every day. You increase general everyday movement is the number one goal for aerobic conditioning. It doesn't mean running and pounding your body and getting injured.
I love that. Oh, there's so many good takeaways here on positive health. And if we give the context that the 26.2 is ridiculous and bring it down to a more manageable and respectable and attainable, distance of 13 or 6 or 5 or whatever a person can do safely and still have a quality of life. And that,
Yeah, still
setting
have that quality of life
pretty
preserved. Yeah.
important, pretty important
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. And
Oh,
so, you can do like bucket list achievements. We're all in favor of that. And so if you're so inspired and you've read a book and said, you know what, I want to push myself and challenge myself and see if I can hike to one of the 14ers in Colorado this summer, or hike to the highest peak in my county next summer, or run this fun run that's 13 miles in my community, or 10K. These things are great challenges to get out of the comfort and convenience and expectations and predictability of modern life, but the pattern and the recurrence of day after day after day of pounding the body, that's where we divert strongly from evolutionary biology. And that's where the message, for example, in a nice storytelling book like Born to Run, has been misinterpreted to think, well, I'm going to sign up for 3 halves this year and then culminate with the marathon, and ignore the fact that I don't have this broad-based functional fitness starting point, for example, like a bushman might have, because they walk 3 to 9 miles every single day in the course of their daily life. Of course, they can chase an antelope down for 4 hours. So it's all about kind of reframing what it means to be fit, what it means to take care of your body, rather than to blindly follow this corporate marketing and cultural programming telling you that the marathon is the ultimate achievement.
I dig it. Yeah, there's a lot behind that. I know a lot of people get caught up in that. What about health wise? So, a person who's a very avid runner, what does it do? Hormone change, fat storage, injuries. You mentioned that injury stat was off the charts. That blew my mind. What are some things like that that a person can anticipate if they continue down overtraining, basically?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I talked about that fat max heart rate.
Hmm.
Um, the more you can move throughout the day, the more healthy you're going to be. Almost to, and there's research on this group of people that they studied at the Cooper Institute, I believe, called super exercisers. So they found these people that exercise 30 to 35 hours per week for decades. I don't know who these people are. If you're listening now, drop a note to Sean. He'll send you a free gift. I'll send you a free book, man, if you're a super exerciser. But it's probably people that, and I know a few people in my life that walk 5 miles every single day. There's a guy at the park where I walk with my mother and her little dog, a couple laps, and you see this guy, and he's already done a few laps, and he lives a few miles from the park. And so there's people that are retired, whatever. And the more you can keep your body moving every day, for example, if we decide to take a break from podcasting and we walk the Colorado Trail next summer and do all 28 segments and 468 miles, whatever, that is going to be an extremely healthy way to spend your summer. So it's all about managing that stress impact of the session to be low to moderate intensity, where the body feels refreshed and energized after a good brisk walk, or even a 2 hour hike. You usually come home and you feel great and alert and energized. And honey, can you rake the leaves? Sure, I can rake the leaves. And it's all part of being more healthy and active and energetic. And the body loves to move, and the Homo sapiens species is required to move for optimal health. So when we sit, and you've probably heard and talked about this on the show, the sitting is the new smoking branch of medical and health research is validated that when we sit, all kinds of bad stuff happens to our muscles, joints, connective tissue. We get tight hamstrings, we get weak glutes, we get tight hip flexors, we get a dysfunctional lower back, a weak core, all these things. So just walking around is a huge health boost with no upper limit cap. But if we start to get into these chronic patterns as we call them, for example, the wonderful CrossFit community where people are, doing this life-changing improvement in their fitness, and then you see them going there 4 days a week, 5 days a week, doing three super blast-off workouts and then two medium ones, it becomes too much really quickly and easily. And that's especially prevalent in the scene of like the triathlon training and the ultra running and the marathon training, and even people that are just a little overcooked gym freaks where they're in there doing a hard class every single morning and thinking that's a path to health and fitness. I'll throw in one other little thing with this monologue here where probably the biggest reason that people are out there and doing endurance training is desire to drop excess body fat or look good or have a good physique.
Mhm.
Running does not contribute to fat reduction. It does not. This is validated by science, and the reason is because it's too stressful. And when you chronically overproduce stress hormones, what happens is you send the genetic signals to store excess body fat and also shed lean muscle tissue. So you become what this is called skinny fat, where you have a spare tire. It's especially the visceral fat that is prompted by excess stress hormone production, chronically excessive stress hormone production. So what you see in the running community especially are people shuffling along at a very slow pace, perhaps close to walking. I talked about 14 minutes a mile, and carrying extra weight despite hours and hours of devotion to what's considered extreme endurance training. And so the way to escape this and to get out of this rut is slowing down into the fat burning heart rates where your appetite and your satiety are not dysregulated. When you go for a walk and you come back or you go for an hour hike, your appetite and your mood and your energy are stabilized for hours after, rather than that crash and burn feeling that a lot of extreme exercisers get, as I described, the spinning class in the morning and the Ben and Jerry's at night.
Very well said. And a lot of what we do in our business can definitely speak to that honesty there. And a lot of stuff that you talked about, you were on the Strong First podcast with Craig Marker in 2018, talking much about this kind of stuff, about training intelligently as opposed to just working out for the sake of working out. And I believe one of the episodes we had with Craig was using intuition and also getting away from HIIT, high intensity interval training, and doing HURT, high intensity repeat training. Whereas if you can repeat the interval at the same intensity or the same strength or same speed, then you're doing good. The moment it dips by more than 10, 15%, you call it.
Mm.
And it's a really trackable, safe way to train. This is how I do a lot of my people. And we see great results as opposed to just going for, 90% intensity for as long as possible till they get sick and fall in a puddle of their own sweat. It's
Yeah,
not very
it's rough.
sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And I'm excited that this book is getting out there to help a lot of people. And walking is so approachable. And it's honestly my favorite thing. My favorite thing to do is get home from work and go grab my wife and dog and walk for 20, 30 minutes and explore our new neighborhood.
Fantastic. Yeah, it really, there's a lot of research how walking helps the brain function and the brain-derived neurotropic factor. It helps the immune function. It also helps build the musculoskeletal and aerobic resiliency to go and pursue more challenging athletic goals, including if you want to go sign up for a running race or a mud run or a Spartan race. Walking is your foundation for all manner of more complex athletic activity, whereby running is sort of um, a often a destructive and catabolic act because it's too stressful for the vast majority of people. So again, like I'm not trashing running. I'm just giving you permission to take off and run when you can maintain a heart rate at or below your fat max and actually engage in the act of running with correct form so that you're not getting injured. And running with correct form, we talk about this in an entire chapter in the book. We want to see a midfoot landing over a balanced center of gravity so you look beautiful and graceful like a deer or like your family dog when it runs off after the bunny that comes across the trail. But instead of that shuffling form, that is the driving cause of injuries, is poor form enabled by the elevated cushioned shoes, whereby you wouldn't even be able to shuffle down the road for 6 miles without these shoes. So the shoes allow poorly adapted people to run who shouldn't be running in the first place. So we got a good section trashing the modern running shoe and all the marketing where the shoes are contending that these are going to help make the impact easier, prevent injury. And what's fascinating, British Journal of Sports Medicine revealing that after years of research and looking all around the world for data, there has never been a single research submitted to prove that running shoes prevent injury. But
Whoa.
that's all we see with the marketing for the past 50 years. Is like put on these wonderful new modern high-tech motion control shoes and it'll help prevent injury. They do not. They are the driving cause of injury because they enable the poor form that causes injury.
Wow, that's incredible. It speaks to learning to do the motion first, right? Building the foundation, building the
Yeah.
correct movement as opposed to a cast or whatever, basically around your foot,
Hmm.
stabilizing it.
Yeah, yeah. So, take off and run with correct form. And most people can run for 100 meters with correct form. And then they start to get out of breath because running is a difficult act. And so we don't realize what a tough sport running is. I tell this to parents and kids, like high school runners that get injured, and they talk to me and they want advice. And I say, understand, like, this is the second toughest sport in your school besides tackle football in many ways. And it's the second most injurious sport. It's a different type of injury, but it's brutal on the body, especially when you train in an inappropriate manner, like the vast majority of modern runners.
Good point. Yeah, the stats on the injury I did not realize, but it does make sense. I'm so glad I was never attracted to running. This is like,
Yeah, I mean, this was my life for so long, right? I was a little runner in high school and a Division I college athlete, and I got injured a lot. And then I got into triathlon. I had a 9-year career on the pro circuit. I lived and breathed endurance sports, and it was a wonderful, experience and the period of time in my life when I traveled around the world and raced on the pro circuit. And then after that, in the interest of keeping in shape, I would enjoy jogging and riding my bicycle. So I was an endurance athlete my whole life until recently, as we've talked about on the other podcast. Now I'm a sprinter and a high jumper, proudly out of that endurance scene. But once I escape and get some perspective, I realize like what the F was I thinking at times when I was pushing myself so hard to finish my first marathon when I was 16 years old. Like, what kind of kid wants to go through that torture? And it was all about me wanting to, find my place in society and distinguish myself as an athlete and get noticed by the girls in high school. If I could win the race, maybe the cheerleaders would give me the time of day and all these driving competitive drives. But the outlet was in many ways easy to abuse and get out of hand. And for example, in college, when I kept getting injured, it started to affect my self-esteem, and it was a difficult time for me because I identified as a runner, and now I can't run because my foot hurts. So what do I have to hang on to and figure out? And I had to kind of like broaden my horizons and realize this is not the end all. But it's easy to get sucked in, especially when you're a competitive type person, which is what almost all people out are who are attracted to something crazy like running a marathon.
yeah, what a coming of age, like having gone through that. I know the professional triathlon career you had must have been pretty challenging to go from all that activity to this, but now taking away like the long or the high jump and the sprints, the favorite parts for you, the safer parts for all of us. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
And also, Sean, I had to learn the hard way. And this was probably about halfway through my career where I came to this awakening that I was pushing my body too hard. I wanted to win so bad and race against the top guys and get a little bit faster. So in pursuit of like that 1% improvement, I drove my body into the ground and we'd go biking for 84 miles and then go to the swimming pool and swim for an hour and then get up the next day and jog 10 miles and all this kind of thing. And I finally had to realize, dang, I do want to beat these guys and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And a lot of times, what it took was sleeping in until 10 a.m. and lazing around the house and then going and stretching and swimming for 15 minutes and getting a massage and watching 2 movies in the evening. And that was a great awakening for me because it absolutely worked. And taking care of the body works better than any sort of Rocky Balboa type of regimen.
Absolutely. Sounds like you've learned, you've come full circle. As have I. I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, and then when I started doing wearing heart rate monitor and tracking heart rate variability, and then appetite, resting heart rate, irritability, all the things for overtraining, and I was
Yeah.
clicking all the boxes. I was overtrained myself.
Yeah.
It's a nice
Yeah.
eye opener. But yeah,
Yeah.
rest doesn't get enough credit. Rest, sleep, recovery. It's the
That's our biggest hope for the book, is to, acquaint people with the amazing benefits of a walking-oriented lifestyle in general and a barefoot-inspired lifestyle. As you know, we have the Paluva company, and you're helping us promote and, getting into the right barefoot-oriented shoes so that you can actually walk with a good gait and get those feet stronger for whatever athletics you like to do. But, that's the message, is like the path to fitness is not what you've been socialized to think, and it can be a lot more fun and inspiring and energizing and complement your life and your other responsibilities rather than be this ordeal that is about pain and suffering.
Oh, I love it. And to your point about barefoot training, I'm barefoot right now, and I just got done training. I truly believe, in most of us in the Strong First community, that training barefoot or in minimalist shoes like your Paluvas is the way to go for so many reasons. Tactile response, the full length for the hamstring, a myriad of benefits, and especially if you approach it with walking. In fact, we have a couple pairs in our gym for people to rotate through, as long as they're
Oh, how
size 11
cool.
and a half. Yeah, I have a
Right on.
video I'll send you over. My friend, he's Rastafarian, who helped me build the yard with these
All
like
right.
6 foot long dreadlocks doing kettlebell swings with your Palooza shoes.
Right on.
Yeah,
I'll
we
send you
would,
some more samples too. That's a great thing to have. I love that.
we would love that. We'll put those to
Yeah.
use at the gym. Well, there's this book is great. I mean, going through the chapters and just the tip of the iceberg today with you. Born to Walk, right here. Brad Kearns, Mark Sisson. You probably know them as well from the Primal Blueprint, which we live by in our gym as well. You guys put out really helpful content and really helpful books and materials, and you're really out there doing it, and you're leading the industry in the right direction, and I truly appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Sean. We have a nice website landing page, born2walkbook.com, where you can order at your favorite retailer and then get all these bonus items, shopping discounts, PDFs that you can download with supplementary info. So I think that's a great place for people to go and learn more about the book. And thanks for the chance to share. I appreciate your show and what you're doing. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Brad. To all you listeners out there, I'll put all this in the show notes, and also want to say that there's reviews on Amazon from Laird Hamilton. So, I mean, big people out there appreciate Mark and Brad's work. I'll put all the show notes below. I'll track down that great dance that Brad mentioned as well. Put that in the show notes, and we'll have Brad on again here in the near future. As always, appreciate you, Sean Sewell, Engearment.com podcast. Until next time, take care.